So we have 5 minutes now. Hello everyone and welcome to the second webinar about conformity assessment schema version 3 and test models for CGMES. As you have been informed, the focus of this second webinar is to address the feedback received from you on test models and conformity assessment for CGMES 3. I would like to thank you again so much for taking the time to inform us about your opinions, about the comments that you have sent to us regarding our work. I would like to now introduce you a little bit with the agenda of this topic, and after that I will also inform you about the rules of the questions and answers under webinar recording, and I believe after this then the Svein Olsen and Chavdar Ivanov will continue to discuss the content of other slides and other presentation part. So I can share first the first part of the slides, and then Svein will continue with his part. Do you see on the screen the presentation?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we will start discussing a little bit of the introduction, and this is also part of the information that I'm providing to you. And after that, the second part will be about conformity assessment. We will spend around 15 minutes on that. Then we will have test configurations, status, further update, and next steps. So we will have much more discussion maybe on the moderated discussion topic focused on received feedback, where we will have a little more deep information on the feedback or from our side some information for you. And then for questions and answers, we will have 15 minutes in the end, but also during the call, I will try to manage your and provide your opinions and bring them to the discussion for all of us. For some rules that I would like to inform you, the webinar will be recorded and publicly available. As you have seen, this was the case with the first webinar. And after this recorded webinar, you will have a version with a specific link where you can access and you can see all this information that we will discuss today. So please mute yourself in order to ensure sound quality. And in case of a question, please submit a comment in the chat window as you did in the first webinar, and raise your hand so then I can bring the question here. And I will also take some notes and keep those questions and comments in our database, and we will be able to address them also after the call. Regarding the material, you're already familiar with some of the links I have provided to you, not only the material for the review, but also the previous information that we have stored and that we had for CGMES 3 in general. Today, what I brought in addition to this, what you will have, which will be helpful for your information, is the webinar that we had last year about CGMES 3. And on that webinar, we discussed about the conformity a little bit, the process and how it is organized. And I think you will find also some important information on that link. So you will have all of this also provided after the call, together with the minutes and all the related materials. So the content of the webinar you already know a little bit that we have provided to you, and I think from now on we will move to the more specific information, which starts with conformity assessment schema version 3. And I believe from now on we will have great speakers coming after me, so Svein Olsen and Chavdar. So I think, Svein, is your turn to continue with the presentation.
Yeah, thank you for introducing me, and thanks for showing up to the webinar. As a good turnout. I'll present so I can actually. Was the wrong? Yeah. I'll give thanks a lot for providing the feedback. We got a lot of good feedback. However, always wants more. So we'll come a little bit back to how that process can be continuous. First, I just want to recap a little bit about the conformance assessment schema. So the version 3, a little bit what we said in the previous webinar. So the idea here is for CGMES, and if you want more of the detail, you can look at the YouTube video or just look at the presentation that's available. But the key driver here is the business needs. What we've done in the 3.0 is very much a service pack to align with the IEC standards that's up in the 450 series. And also adding all the experience that we have from both the 10 years network development planning and the CGM. For everybody, it's important to note that the 2.4 CGMES 2.4, the current version, were based on assumption for the network code. Now we know it much better, and that is being added into the seminar. And of course, you can look at the video from January last year, and you get a deeper understanding all of the changes that we did in CGMES if the previous recording is not enough. So the timeline is a long history. Go back to 2014 when the approval of 2.4, and at that time the network code wasn't available. 2018 we come up with the CGMES roadmap. In the previous webinar went a little bit through what we have covered in the roadmap and what we're looking at coming up. What we hope is that the 3.0 will form the foundation that we can add a lot of the other requirement that's coming up into it. The 2019, the SOC approved. Then in December 2019, we published a CDV. And we also had the webinar that RSIM was referring to, then you can download. And RSIM in this presentation should also have a link to the video that was recorded at that time. Not all the webinar was recorded, but the one that was. Then in April, we had the end of the commenting. And we took all of these comments and worked through it to provide the FDIS that was in October last year submitted. We also have developed beta releases that we have tested out and getting experience what works and what doesn't work. We would always be good if we can retrospect having more of this because the real implementation is always very, very important. And that's why I also encourage all of your vendors that you are trying to implement as a prototype as early as possible so we can get any feedback, because the earlier we get feedbacks, the more possibility it is for us to make correction. As I also said, we are planning to have a new amendment to it, but in principle that is just making sure that all the CGMES is then fully aligned with the 452s as they're being available. Now the FDIS is out for voting. Bear in mind that the voting here is primarily just to correct any major errors. So the FDIS is the changes has been accepted as being a response to the CDV. And is now for all the national committees possible to download and vote on. So we are hoping that the voting is into April, and after that we'll make it. It will be made ready for IS and it can be purchased. In June, we are seeing that we're going to have approval of publishing the conformity assessment, we will also be able to see what stage and know feedback exactly when we are ready to do the conformity. The idea is that it will be some possible to do it in parallel to O, and then we'll yeah, at least in some of the period. So what is the upcoming next step? So what we will do as our sim, we're going to be looking at documents that we the feedback we got on the document, and later today we'll take in some of this feedback and put them as a discussion point, where we'll kind of introduce our point of view on this, where we have one, but also hoping that other people can contribute to see if this is something that more people are thinking is a good idea, or also a little bit steering the direction we're going. We will be in this. We will give the feedback for all the ones that did directly. So we will give a comment on each of the items. The one that creates more work, we will open an issue and we will refer to that issue. And then in the release notes, as we publishing the next version, we will tell which issue that has been covered here. That's just to simplify, because some of the things that's been open is multiple people have open similar type of question issue. So it is easier to then track it with one issue number. And then, yeah, we will have a kind of a release process on that. We will also make sure that the test configuration is finalized. Where it's been pointed out errors, we'll fix it. We are then planning to have a new distribution of the test configuration. We will give 2 to 3 weeks consultation. So be prepared. The optimistic view is that the second half of April, but I will be prepared for end of April, beginning of May, to have a look on the updates. We will then go through the approval process, primarily getting the that we can then publish the document on the website, so it'll be open for everybody. And at one point, we then will be a publication, the launch of the factory acceptance test cases, or the conformity acceptance. So the expectation is that this will happen in June 2021. We need kind of, we need the SOC approval. But bear in mind that this doesn't lock the case version 3, or will be 3.1, 3.2, but it will follow a change procedures. It will probably take a little bit longer time to get things in, but of course errors, new things will be having a bigger change procedure. But the bug fixes, we will always like to make sure that we have fixes bugs as quick as possible, because there's no point having test data or test configuration that's is incorrect. That will be a big problem. So pay attention to the worsening of these cases, and then submit tickets or issues. We will in the next webinar, or we'll give you exact information where to contact. And until that has been published, everything goes through our sim. So just send any emails, any question, or any issue in regards to the CAS and test configuration to him. We're planning to make sure that there's a common email address that are maintained and monitored. Also quite important is that we don't necessarily seeing that the approval is a one-time off. Right now, what we've done is a tool has been certified, and then and then even with newer version, it hasn't been paid too much attention. The key thing is that it needs to be a continuous, making sure that you're you have the costs that is published, new version or new application needs to then be addressed, and with a test configuration, the vendors perform the use cases and submit the declarative conformance and register for assessment. So you can always do a first-hand assessment that you can publish. If you want to have a second assessment, you register it on the site, and then either ENTSO-E or an assessment lab will then make sure execute the testing, and the assessment body will make a report that the opinion body, which is currently the ENTSO-E SIM expert group or subgroup there, will accredit this state, and attestation will be of conformity will be issued on the website. We'll be looking at the current website to upgrade it to make it more readable. Also being published the 3.0, so that will be available as soon as it's been approved. Also important to know that when we start looking at the site acceptance, so with the site, then you're actually using the utilities data. So in principle, it's the utility, but to some extent, it's the merge between the tool and the utility, because we're dealing with the utility data, and the poor performance of doing different types of testing. So currently, this has been done as part of each of these projects. But what we want to do is to also kind of standardize this to help that process. But right now, that is something in the process, and we have used some of the test use cases that's been drafted are trying to address those items. So again, particularly also maybe the utility, pay attention to this, and then provide us any feedback that you can do that makes sense. The whole idea here is to help the vendors to do one set of tests that they can notify all their customers and says, hey, this is what our application support, and we have gone through all of these tested, and also to help the utility that they know that the minimum set with the current test data or the approved test data has been done, and thereby they know what type of attention they need to do with the site acceptance when they're dealing with their data. And again, what we're trying is to help the utility and the vendors to make it easier to understand what is the expectation of the data that's going to be run and what's the expectation of the application. This all to be able to speed up, because as we see things are changing, we need to try to support some way of an evergreen application that we can easily add new functionality to application, and they're all being according to the standard. And if we are going in a direction that creates more work for both the vendors and the utility and give less benefit, then really this is the time to scream out and help us navigate, because that's really our goal, is to get better quality for less money. One of the things that we went to is the code component. We didn't get too much comment on this. So what we will do in the upcoming releases, we will skip the 2019. It could be generated on request, but in general, what we are seeing is the 2020 for backwards compatibility. This means there are some changes in regards to header, but it means it's a step in the direction of dealing with 501. And those header is being issued that was probably open in 2014 from some of the vendors, because they wanted to start looking at model driven, and we need to have some kind of worsening on this profile to make sure that the model driven development works. And we did introduce some of it in 2000, but we didn't quite standardize it. And now we have improved it in the 2020 version. And we are keeping the draft, the 501, so that we can get feedback on this. And again, to help machine-driven development. And together with the vocabulary that's in the RDFS, we also have the shackle constraints that in principle can work without the vocabulary together with these. So that's why it's independent. But that is a way of describing the constraints. We will be trying to inform the people that is interested in how to develop kind of prototypes or use third-party tools to help doing validation, because the direction will be that as the data is not necessarily maintained in the application that's going to do the study, it's quite important that the data is on sufficient quality before you can do any power flow or any dynamic or short circuit. And these type of rules are explaining that, and that will be helpful both for the utility to understand what is the shortcoming of the data from any tool that they're managing it, and also to give the vendor of the analytic tools understanding what they need to be expecting. And for the tools that's doing data management, what kind of quality are needed before you can pull it off for doing analytics. For backwards compatibility, we're still going to be publishing OCL, but we believe that this will be replaced by Shackle. Is there any question on this before I leave over to Chavdar? I mean, more on the top, we will discuss the topic, but more on the general understanding. Arsim, is there anything come up?
No, for the moment, we don't have any comment on this information that you provided. Maybe it's good that we move forward with Chavdar.
So everybody fell asleep and didn't understand anything I said then. Okay, we'll let Chavdar take over here.
Okay, so now is the time to wake up then. Okay, so we are going to talk here about the test configurations and what is the current status and what we expect to move in the next month or so. So Arsim, you can, or Sven, you can push the slide. Yes. So what we saw, and some of you reported that there are some individual issues in the current test configurations. They were already being channeled to the people that are working on the development. So hopefully these things get fixed. And in addition, we know that some of you already noticed there are some test configurations listed in the test use cases, but were not included in the initial package for review. As we said earlier, some of the types and modifications of the test configurations are still under development. So that's why we also put now into the timing that, as Sven said, second half of April, beginning of May, once we have the complete set of test configurations, so you will have an opportunity to have another look and and feedback on relatively short notice. So we can move on. So the following, I think, 4 or 5 slides are listing a set of requirements that were developed by ENTSO-E, and different people that are updating the test configurations are following that. So we thought it would be good to to go relatively quickly through that list, and so for you to get some more insight what we plan to have in these test configurations. And as you already have seen what is done so far, you get kind of a picture of what still needs to be delivered. So let's go more or less one by one. So the first one is obviously fixing of any errors we had in the test configurations before. So far, this appears as covered. At least we don't have a feedback that indicates some major issues coming from the past. Of course, there are some new one appearing that needs to be fixed, but at least the old reporting issues should be considered. Then the main task was actually to migrate these test configurations to CGMES 3, and with that effort, it's not just a simple conversion, but there was a check if the test configurations are meeting the new requirements, or if they demonstrate the recommended approach for CGMES, which is this requirement 5 you have at the bottom. So something that we still need to do is to work out the documentation for different test configurations and their variants. So the documentations, including the power flow, the short circuit, and any other results and statistics will need to be updated, because in some of the test configurations, some bus bar or transformer or some breaker configuration was probably being added, and this applies, of course, some changes in all that documentation. So we asked the people that were working on these models to suggest any improvements. So this, we had a few hints on the R4 requirement, but I would say not that much. So we can go on the next slide. So something that we wanted to realize in the test configurations and to be able to cover the variety of options. And this is something which is extremely challenging, as you know, for all of us. So looking at real data and working with models, doing studies, you face every day an amazing amount of different possibilities that people are using in their models. So this is the reality. Of course, these models are very small to be like bulletproof and have all the possible system configurations, modeling configurations, or configurations kind of dependent from the tool that is sourcing the model. But the idea was to have as many as possible, and I'm quite sure that the task will not be done with the delivery of the next version, but hopefully it's a step forward, and building a community around these test configurations will be very good to further enhance them and improve. Another thing on the R7, go back, yeah. So this limited number of bus branch test configuration shall be provided relates to the fact that now in CGMES 3 there is a change, as you already should know. The connectivity nodes are a required element into the equipment. So all the models should be built with the based on the connectivity nodes, and the topological nodes are pure outcome. And with that one, ENTSO-E agreed to limit the pure best branch test configurations and to illustrate more on the node breaker. So that's the reason for R7. When we and that's basically R8 is also in that direction, saying that only one bus branch configuration will be for these three basic models: the microgrid, small grid, and mini grid. Let's go to the next slide. So talking about the node breaker test configurations, looking at what is available in the real exchanges. So the following configurations here of a single bus bar with auxiliary bus, and so on, the double bus bar. These are going to be added to the test configurations. At the moment, I don't really remember in which one we targeted that, but either in one or multiple, this kind of configurations will be covered. So let's go to the next. Yeah,
do you remember in Svedala, do we have many of these different configurations there? There might be.
Yeah, there might be some of them happening there. I don't have the insight now, but the Svedala model, it was some new model, more purely node breaker model, which we brought to the package, and that one I believe should surely have at least 2-3 of these, if not all. I mean, single and double bus bar, it's something very common for the node breaker. Now on this set here, 10, 11, 12, 13, they are around the regulating control and the tap changer control. And here, as we always see in the real models, there are all kinds of combinations. So these 4 here were selected to be included into the test configurations at least in a more explicit way. So you should expect to see these combinations. So if we go to the next one. So yeah, 14, it's kind of following the same. So again, the regulating control and the tap changing control story, but 15 is on the control terminals and what can be controlled. So still related to the control. We know that the control model is not perfect still in CGMES. Even if CGMES 3, there are some imperfections, and that should definitely move in the future to some more elaborated model. But as we didn't want to touch it now, as it's a very sensitive area. So we should at least try to, in the test configurations, give multiple examples so that we can guide the community if there's some misunderstanding on the model.
Well, we could also probably say, I mean, we kind of two-edged sword in a way that we are providing a lot of test cases. It could emphasize that, you know, all the test cases are relevant, because it will be impossible for us to create enough test cases to show all the possibilities, particularly with dealing with combinations. So what's important is that we have the most relevant and the most important. But we do see that a lot of vendors are implementing it exactly you just covered what the test cases are saying, but bear in mind that they really need to look at the standard, and of course what real cases that the utility is having. But we'll try our best to come up with examples that at least can help you in that to see how it should be modeled.
Mm. Okay, so let's move on. Yeah, so there's quite a bit of text here. The first one, R16, is focused on the hybrid modeling, bus branch with node breaker. So here there is an attempt to have Svedala covering more of that, and to be able to have a Svedala connected with a microgrid, maybe for some of the tests. So you see in the R19, there's a requirement to have a boundary of that model so that you can attach microgrid to it in a special test use case. And there's something interesting now on R17, and that's maybe a good also point for discussion a little bit when we move to the next session, the discussion one. We wanted to have some way to validate if the topology processing done by the tools is performed correctly. And at the moment, there are some requests that we adopt one or two of the test use cases to have a test step which requires that. And it will be interesting to see how we practically do it, because of course the tool can import the EQ and SSH and produce a TP, which should be basically the same like the referenced one. So that maybe one way to validate the topology processing. And if we have some other ideas, we can discuss in the discussion time. The next one, R18, relates to the HVDC, and we will see a little bit later in the slides what are our ideas on the HVDC. This is a huge area to explore in terms of test configurations, with all the possibilities of how you can model it inside your grid, outside as a separate mass, to be internal HVDC, to be interconnection, or to cross borders. And if you take into account all the combinations of different controls that are available now into the CGMES, so you can easily imagine that you need quite a few HVDC links to exercise all of that. I'm not sure if the test configurations developed now will be completely covering everything, most probably not, but hopefully it covers the main setup. Maybe we can move to the next slide. Yeah, so the following, I think 3 slides are now focused on how the microgrid types will be developed. So there will be 3 types of microgrid. Before, I think there were 5. So we try also to minimize some of the test configurations, not to have it too many. So we know that people may be lost if there are too many files to look at. So type 1 will be built on the base case that you already saw, and there will be one set of different files to create this type. So this will be the place where you will also see some difference files added. And of course, we also have the full microgrid type 1. So this requirement R11 with the different bus bars will also be put here. So this the single bus bar and the double bus bar and the ring bus. So some other lines or buses may need to be added if we don't have enough substations in the microgrid. I think we have 2 or 3 now, so it should be kind of possible to do it. So then we can move to type 2, I think, the next slide. So that one will look more on HVDC, and it will also look to demonstrate the boundary point in a substation. So you know that CGMES 2.4 was designed initially with that idea, but there were some problems into the modeling which prevented actually realizing this in reality. So now CGMES 3 closes this gap. And here in the model where we have something to do with the HVDC, we can have the boundary point positioned in a substation, which is most probably close to the reality. So we have this requirement 18 on the HVDC, and the idea is also to have one internal, the CSC. We currently have some VAC in the Belgium MES, and to have the VAC example as a tie line, and then to have a variant with the separate mass as a HVDC being a separate mass. So this kind of combinations here will be realized in the type 2. And it would be very good when we get this out for the second review, but even before, if you have a specific, yeah, the sharing stopped, I think. If you have some specific idea of what tricky combination of control that could be added to these VSC or CSC links, it might be a good hint to add in the development. I think Svein, who was sharing the slides, dropped, and now he's coming back.
Yeah.
Yep, I was dropped.
Yeah. So can you share back?
I'll certainly can do that.
Yeah, so we can go to the next one. For the type 3. Yeah, so type 3, it's looking at the 24-hour variant. We did one sample in the previous conformity scheme, but now we realized that that the model had a few problems. So we will try to fix it.
Maybe we have to make 96.
Yeah, or 96. Yeah.
Prepare ourselves for 15 minutes. That's coming.
Yes. So
scaring me.
I believe that's maybe the last slide on the series of test configuration. So the last one is this with the what is the next steps, and that's a little bit repeating what Svein was also telling. So now the base cases will be updated with to reflect on your input we got through the commenting sheets. And then there's also ongoing work on the different types. The documentation, as I mentioned, should be updated, and hopefully according to the plan, mid or second half of April, that should go out to you to have a look. but we would not keep it for that long, as Sven said, 2-3 weeks, and then it will be part of the conformity assessment scheme. As we know, and it was said already, there is a form for change request, and as soon as somebody finds issue in the test configurations, there should be some mechanism to fix this and to clean up any remaining issues. So is there some comments related to the test data? Or something that should be further clarified?
Coming for the moment. Yeah.
Okay.
So they fall asleep with your presentation as well, Chapter.
Yes. But now, now we need to select who is going to speak for the next 1 hour. So we may look at the list. But so the idea here with the next slides, there are just a few. But our belief was that with this 1 hour session that is coming now, we will be able to attract you to speak. So what we have done here is we picked a few items from the feedback you sent to ENTSO-E. Maybe you can go to the next slide. Sven, are you there? Okay.
Maybe we lost the connection with Sven again.
Did we lost him? Okay.
If that's the case, I can share the presentation.
Yeah, you can share it then back.
Let me just open it again.
Yeah, so, but I can continue speaking. So we got 45 comments in total from multiple companies, and we looked there, and some there is some echo. Yes, some of these comments were related to the test data and to some other issues that we tried to already kind of cover with the information. And there are some others which we thought deserve some discussion. And it's really good now to use that upcoming hour to almost enter into a brainstorming mode and to get your feelings or opinion on these issues. This will be used in a way to guide the update. So what will be happening in the next month is that ENTSO-E will gather internally, go through the comments, and improve the test use cases. I think most of the comments were on the test use cases, and that was area we knew that it's not fully finalized, and it's the most important in a way and controversial. So this is something that all of you are following when you run the procedures, and that's something what ENTSO-E or the assessment labs will be following when checking the results. So it's really important, and the devil is in the details there, and in the different steps and what is checked, how the results are recorded. So let's jump into the next slide.
Yeah, well, I mean, we got quite a lot of comment also on the schema as well.
Yeah.
So we hope to update that and thereby finalizing it. We were thinking, finalizing the test model might take a little bit longer, but the schema is probably something that we can do.
Yeah, so this basically what comes now in the next slide is mostly on the schema on the test use cases. So let's jump into the first one, and I think, yeah, I hope actually most of the people that provided this comments here are in the call. So please feel free to raise hand and start talking, because Sven and I will not be able to talk each other for 1 hour, although we know that Sven can do it. So on the first one, there was a proposal to try to split between functions related to data handling and simulation categories. I think the person who was sending that was hinting that it might be handy for the utilities to get better orientation of what the tool is supporting. And yeah, that's a good moment here for discussion. The setup we have now is based on the understanding that we need to cover as many as possible applications. And maybe you can go to the next one, which is the matrix, just as a supporting slide for the discussion. And here, is there some opinions now from your side, how you would welcome or not welcome further categorization about these functional categories? At the moment, you see here on the screen, we have this blue area on the very top, function category, and then we have this, how many, 7, 8, which are from the import to the dynamics, that row.
So to say a little bit the thinking we have, so we struggle quite a lot to try to find a way of granularity that can support everything from a converter to a network model management tool that can do everything, and we want to be careful of standardizing tools. To some extent, we do need some set of tools or set of services that combines it. But one of the things that the way we did this was to split it up so that a pure power analytic tools can work side by side by data management without having, but this what we ended up, a lot of people were complaining because they need to cover everything, and the idea is that you don't necessarily need to cover everything in one application. And what's struggling is a little bit that how can you say that I can cover all of them with the combination of tools. And a little bit the guidance that we have is you can, as long as you have one installation and it runs as one system, is fine. But if you have to kind of looks like the two systems that is just interacting, then it becomes a bit bigger problem. So that's a little bit the thinking that we have, and any feedback on how to improve it is very welcome.
So now is the moment to take the mic.
Hey, Shavdar and
Yes.
Sun, can you hear me? I think that question was coming from me. Yeah, so the major concern I have, I fully agree with what Sun has covered. I think it's breaking that down into this functional matrix is a perfect idea. The problem I have is that you also have a standard, I think it's called standard matrix or standard grade. So you basically have bronze and gold and silver whether the product is compliant to CGMES 3.0 at the high level. And what I noticed for 2.4.15 is that most of the attestations I was able to find online posted by ENTSO-E, pretty much all vendors are having, are receiving the bronze at the, I think, at the standard level. And it's sometimes it's kind of confusing when a new customer is browsing through, what is the grade for the product, and they realize that, oh, you're only achieving bronze, and they rarely pay attention to some of the function matrix, and sometimes we have to clarify with the customer or the utility that you need to look into the details about the requirements that you're really looking for, and that's what we really achieve the gold grade rather than the bronze grade. So that's one of the concerns I have, and I've been dealing with some of the utilities having trouble, clarifying some of this standard grade here.
Yes, so maybe, yeah, I understand. So maybe the confusion comes a little bit of the usefulness actually on this standard category, because indeed now the current rules are that you get a standard there on the top, silver, bronze, and gold, based on all different functions. And if you don't support even one function, that you easily land with the bronze. So maybe the question is, in a way, do we really need that one?
I think that's a very valid question. So one is, do we need it? Can we maybe make converter and then, or modeling management and then give the grade? But I think the main question is, do we need it?
What about you keep it on a function level rather than on overall?
We have it on function level, so that will stay. So the idea of this top level was just so we were a little bit afraid that people going in and having one thing they didn't. Yep, and we got gold, so we are CGMES gold. Kind of trying to indicate that what we you have more than one. So that was a little bit the thinking of it, but if it creates more confusion, it might be better just taking it away.
But then maybe utilities would know that we are not creating an overall grade, that when they say someone is saying gold in CGMES, gold specifically in what, then they get asked the question.
Correct. Is any utility that wants to say anything here, that what they?
So basically the question is, would you care of the overall support, or you're more interested on the functional support? Okay. So maybe if there's no immediate reaction, we can take that question as a potential internal discussion of, do we really go further with the standard category, or we drop it, or we replace it by something which can make happy all kinds of tools. Okay, so there is then the second question. I think you need to go back to the...
Or did I go too far?
Yeah, it was too far. Yeah, so the functional matrix here on the bronze, silver, gold. So we can go back to the matrix then. So there is
This matrix or
this
the
one. Yeah, this one. When you look here at first sight, there is potential confusion because we see bronze on all different test use cases for the import and the export. But actually, so you need to read this import and export category together with your profile support. So if your application is supporting, I don't know, only SSH, that might be not the best example, but let's take this one.
Oh,
So
it could be a good example. So you have
yeah.
application that takes all the schedule and all the setting
Yeah.
from different sources and producing SSH.
Yeah. So for that one, you will need to only execute test use case 4 in order to get bronze for the import functionality. And I think there is some writing into the scheme explaining that, but based on the feedback, my personal opinion is that we may need to put some examples to illustrate that, as unfortunately we have this table as a 2-dimensional and it's a little bit hard to explain it in the Excel. We do have another small table which was included in the Excel next to it, not that one, but another we didn't put here on the slides, and that one refers to which test use cases are required per profile. So if you want to if your application is supporting only SSH or only boundary, and then you have a list, you need to go to the test use case 1, then test use case 4. If you support a difference file, and if the profile is enabled for this difference file export or import, then you need to cover either 10 or test use case 22. So this is, I think that from the questions we looked, from the feedback, I think for some of you this appears a bit confusing, and we need to see how to fix it. I see Emil is raising hand, so maybe you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. One question related to test use case 03. So what does import of topology profile mean? Because you just said that the TP has been removed and it's used only for export or as output. So if you can clarify that one.
Yeah.
Tricky questions there, huh?
Yeah. So and we may need to revise here, so we don't say that is perfect, and that's exactly the feedback we are looking for. So you can go to the. You moved something, so yeah.
It lives its own life.
Okay, so in general, and I think that's a little bit linked to another question I think we got to clarify these test use cases from 1 to 9 and the other set for the export were meant now with the new design to focus on the area where the application is either importing or exporting only particular instance file of that profile. And here with the topology is a little bit tricky. Yeah, we may.
But it is it is very similar to the SV as well. So a little bit when we started this, we didn't have the SSH, so we kind of had SV and TP both being input and output. Then in CGMES 2.4, we made fairly clear that SV is in principle an output of the power flow. But bear in mind that it is always good to be able to import someone else's case and then visualize it. So you have tools that just visualize solutions. Like for instance, they don't have a power flow. They just visualize, reporting tools, visualization tools. So they would need to import the topology to be able to connect the result, the SV.
And maybe a little bit also on the load flow function, which would require to have, so if the tool is not executing topology processing, they may just need to have the topology information as well.
That's true. So if they don't do topology processing, they would need that, but primarily they wouldn't. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So good question.
But yeah, that would need some more explanation, I think. In what cases the general feedback also is that we need to look at the descriptions of the different test use cases and to elaborate on the purpose. So that was also some comment coming, and in a way it will be important for an application which does many things to see which of these import or export cases are absolutely required for testing. Yeah, Todd, I see your hand rising.
Yeah, just a follow on, Chapter. And I'm assuming that would be specific to what the vendor supports, right? So it wouldn't be a hard requirement. I think, like Sven said, if it's tooling that supports visualization, that would be a logical input into it. So is that by conclusion safe to assume?
Yeah.
Yes, and then in general, we don't want to have anything that's pure requirement, because we leave that a little bit up to the business process or the tool vendor or the utility saying that I need this, these. And so this should be kind of in the granularity that the business process says, okay, for 10 years network development planning, we require you to support these. CGM, we require to use these. And the same goes with the different utilities when they're going to be purchasing. So the idea is that they can then refer to these use cases. These are the ones that we require. And definitely there is not really saying that, all vendor need to support all cases,
Gotcha.
But as we know, a lot of the times of my experience with a vendor, if they know exactly what they need to support, it's fairly straightforward to do it. It's the ambiguity, it becomes difficult. So
Gotcha.
if we are saying exactly what we mean by that, my feeling that, then the vendor says, oh, that's not a problem that we can do.
Yeah, exactly. And then on the utility side, if they understand the business processes and they're looking back at a station, right? And if a vendor specifically doesn't support one of these TUCs, you see what I'm saying, based on the rating, it's not viewed as a negative on the vendor. It's just, it conforms to what functionality they support.
Exactly. And I think with my utility hat, I think it's much better to say no, but then saying we have a plan or we have some support of it, and then saying, than that as a vendor or as a utility going out to purchase, you have to guess, what do you do? Because a lot of the times it's for you're going to compare, and sometimes you don't need that functionality because you cover somewhere else, and there's no point for you to have a lot of duplicates, and of course sometimes duplication is good. So, but it's more like saying that, do you conform to that, and then you can have some kind of indication what you are planning to do it, or an upcoming release will have it. So it helps the communication.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Yeah, and I think there is also a general concern, which I don't know how we all together are able to address, is, for example, for more sophisticated tools that cover basically all of the functionalities here. There is a concern of the overhead in the testing. So, do you really need to go to all the test use cases and to demonstrate every single one, or you can have a shortcut and have exactly the one that are actually more usable? Yeah, when you take into account this big application. So that's maybe something to look at, and if you have some input to that. So if an application is able to import all, for example, in the test use case 9, and it's able to demonstrate single imports of some of the other profiles, do we need to perform the tests for all test use cases or for all profiles? So this kind of questions, I think, come from vendors.
Yeah, because also the granularity, it for each of these, it creates a lot of work for us to maintain and being aware and document and everything. So in some way, that use cases that, you know, this will naturally cover. If I do this, I will also do that. So to some extent, you see, if I'm importing the SV, you know, I have to be able to import the TP in a way. So something like that. So if you do support that, there's no point for you to do the TP as well, or you have to combine it in one test case. But that is a little bit also one topic we have down, why, you know, how we can automate it. Because if you're going to do manual, it's almost the same work anyway. So that's also a question.
Yeah. So maybe we can move on to the next bullet point into the list.
And if so, Todd is not getting too tired, he can take down his hand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the last 2 bullet points, we can maybe take them together. So some of you noticed that not. So the test use cases are not continuous in the terms of numbering, and that's the case because there was a change between CAS version 1 and version 2 of the conformity scheme, where some of the test use cases were deprecated or deleted. And at that point in time, it was agreed that we keep the numbers for not to confuse the people, and it seems now it will be the same. So if we add a new test use case, we give it a new number, but we don't fill in the gaps if there are some gaps in the numbering. So that's the third bullet point. And the fourth one, that's more as an attention point. We have a number of maybe 15 to 17 test use cases into the spreadsheet, and they're marked as a draft. So the intent there was to publish outcome of some ongoing or past going work, and so this is just to know what may come into the future as a part of either enhancing the FAT part of the test or into the SAT. But the plan is that this is not to be finalized now into the next 2-3 months. So still the one that are listed as without draft will be the scope for the next. Sven?
We can very much say they are informative. So we wanted to keep them there, and also for you guys to understand what we are thinking on, so that when you're providing feedback, you can say, okay, well, why don't we put this one in, you know, and make these type of changes. So we wanted to include them so you a little bit know in the direction we're doing, and some of them are very linked to the merging process, that still haven't fully. We have the business process for the CGM, but what we also need is start looking at the TSO, DSO type of use cases in this, and these things are very related to those one. So these are informative. I think that's, and as Chowder said, is a draft. We're not planning for the case 3.0.
Okay, let's go to the next. Yeah, after this. So now there is one very interesting topic here on the first bullet point: to what degree of automation we should go. And that may not fully happen with the next release, but I
think we can be pretty sure of that.
Yeah, but who knows?
Who knows? They can, these angels come down and does it all for us. Yeah.
But so here we know, and all of you that already passed previous conformity tests, that the effort to perform the test, to document them, and then from ENTSO-E to assess them, it's quite significant. It adds value to the end user and to the vendors. That's, I think we can say, but we don't want to continue that forever in a pure manual way. So now the floor is yours to share your ideas of how would you see that. There's some mentioning here of possibility to use Python for the automating of these procedures, but at the same time, any automation like that would require all of the tools to be able to understand that protocols of automation, which puts a burden on the development. So any thoughts or opinions?
Is it, Chavda, is it more like a test harness that would be implemented in Python to use for the purposes of automation?
I think in the first thing, if we think an overall goal would be that you can actually run through the whole, think about like all of these test cases, you almost goes in and then, for that matter, you have a user interface, you cross out which use case you're going to run, as the same as you kind of doing your build, your automated testing at home.
Yeah.
And then you just click this one, and then it will automatically generate the whole thing, and then you get sample. I think we want to have that into the future. The problem is we need to standardize everything, and then we need to some way understanding what's going to be the master. Because right now, in some way, the Excel sheet that we send out is the master. And as we're going to be automated, we need to be more and more precise. And that could be also be for the machines to read it, you need to be more precise. That makes me be a little bit more difficult for the human. And then we might have to transfer the scripting into a way that the human can read it easily. Because if not, you end up with two mastering. So you're mastering of the detail and the overall, and you're spending a lot of time making sure that there are no inconsistency. So. And by doing that, you may want to think, so which language should we use, and how do we go forward?
Yeah. I mean, Python, I think is a reasonable suggestion. So I mean, if you're asking for a vote on that, I think that I think that would be something that would be a valid consideration, in my opinion.
But what level is it you're talking about? This automation that is on the server side.
It could be on everything in a way. It could be so same, for instance, that we are kind of saying up, this is our preconditions, these are the tests that you're going to do, and we're going to put the name run power flow with that setting. That doesn't mean in that first go that this means all the application is supported. That could be kind of second, but at least you have a machine readable way, and then that can of course be transferred, you know, so you say, so you can have some kind of compiler or these are our APIs, because we don't necessarily want to standardize everything per se. And as this needs to be an agile process. It's just no way that we can jump into it and suddenly we have everything automated. But if we're going to be building this, we need to kind of understand, are the vendors, the utility interested? Does it make sense, or is it just, you know, the wrong trap? And if we are making, so if we think this, you know, what type of scripting language should we use? Because I mean, there's hundreds of them, and it's all this kind of test harness, and so and we don't want to support everything. If we have something that's sufficiently rich, then anybody can convert that to whatever they like, wherever they have themselves.
That's also my worry in this case. So of course, if this is like we have these test systems now for the market parties when they're sending documents in the market part of this, when they're sending production plans and settlement data, and also using the SIM standard. They have made a test system for that. When you have the exchanges and you set up test scripts, say that if you want to do this and this, and then basically they put in their own data, and they also then send in what they need to send in, and then they get results back on the same data. So yes.
And then the assumption is that then the results are compared against a master source, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
But that also says, so then the two parties. One part is then the language you use to set up this in the server part, who is actually then receiving these documents. And the other part, if you should then promote some kind of Python also scripting or language to do this on the actor side, actually doing the testing. I'm a bit afraid of that one.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I think there's two parts to this. One is the standardization of an API that can be called, and then the orchestration of calling that API. And they're two different things. So Python to me would be just one way of calling a standardized API, but the difficult part is standardizing the API.
I totally agree, and standardized API would be out of the conformity scope, but
I think there's probably validity in even doing something at a pseudocode or a flowchart level in terms of marking what methods or functionality do you expect to be called, what order, if this is then that type thing. So something the problem of saying something like Python is Python's a very rich language, and are you pushing people down the route of having to effectively add a Python scripting support if they don't already have it? Or are you trying to standardize a standard pattern in some sort of pseudocode where anybody that's done programming could look at it and say, right, I understand how I would program that in X language in order to follow through a process with outputs at each stage, with methods perhaps that need to be called. So is there run power flow? And then what are the parameters? And it's kind of up to you, and that's the first step. The second step, maybe further down the line, would be standardizing what those methods are, what the parameters are, and how they're called via an API. But is the first step more pseudocode flowchart type stuff?
I think the first step is more the pseudocode flowchart. And again, if there are different tools on that. So the idea was to have maybe some way of scripting those. I mean, in general, we have that a little bit in the SIM standard of how to do it. But it is a little bit to where do we start in this? Because, as you know, definitely there is a need to do automated testing. I think we all agree that's the direction we want to do forward. And so the question is a little bit, how can we help that in a way for whatever we're doing for the conformity, and how can we encourage, because some of the API will be more relevant than others in a way. So.
Also, I also would suggest what Alan suggested. Also, it's better to make a flowchart and not something in Python at the moment, because somebody use Python, somebody use I don't know, whatever. It's really better to have a flowchart, and that would really help. Then we really need also we see also what we need to check, or.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, very good input. So
very good.
So but yeah, that's definitely not something we do in 3 months. So that would be some work, and I think maybe most of you are aware that there will be also some R&D projects in Europe, and maybe that's a good topic also for people to look and to develop something.
But if anybody knows anything that they think is very useful, to look at, send RSIM an email and point to that direction. So it's more, a little bit, is this interesting, with the viewpoint that if we can help you guys to automate your testing, then we can help you. We can use also this to automate the conformity assessment, and then we betting better quality for the same effort.
Yeah, it's really a good idea. Really, it's a good idea.
Has anyone looked into the Symbion platform that DNV is building up?
No, I'm not familiar with that. So if you can send a link on that, it will be good.
So maybe Marily can say.
Yeah, I'm here. So we are developing a tool, Svein, that would enable this automated conformity testing. So the idea is to support the utilities and the vendors on providing automated tool that could support them on preparing them to the conformance testing. This is the idea behind the tool, and we are looking into CGMES. So we need to kind of see how we can take this Excel sheet and make more machine readable kind of scripts or test use cases.
Okay, let's move to the next one. So the understanding of these two functions of conformity categories, so with and without topology processing. So I think we mentioned a little bit on that already. So the basic idea was to try to see and maybe to validate the topology processing, or to satisfy some needs of the tools that cannot do topology processing. I don't know if we have that many of them that would do load flow but cannot do topology processing. That might appear a little bit strange. So it's some maybe opinion from all of you will be necessary here to see if we really have that functional category. Having the assumptions that all the models will be having the connectivity nodes and EQ plus SSH, and
but we shouldn't exclude these type of reporting tools. So for power analytic tools, I certainly agree that doesn't, that's some functionality that will need to be supported. But we can quickly see that one is being able to compare a solution from one tool or a solution in one case with another solution. That those things could be relevant, and also for all of these type of reporting.
Yeah, this is definitely needed on the reporting side. But so maybe you go one slide back, I think, where we see the matrix. Yeah, so at the moment here we have the load flow, or it should be power flow, with topology processing and without topology processing. And so this actually assumes that the tool which is running this test can perform load flow, because I think test use case 29 is there for the silver. So there is a bit of a question if the two can perform load flow. Would we need to test that if you import the TP or you don't import it? So that's a little bit the question. Some of your comments were also hinting that, well, if the tool is performing load flow, they anyway will do kind of topology processing in a way before running the Newton Raphson. So,
but would it make sense to swap almost the two power flow items and then put the with TP as without topology processing as part of data visualization?
Yeah, that's good. But then it shouldn't be maybe a load flow.
No.
Yeah.
So we just we need to retype that whole category and dealing with visualization of a power flow result.
Mm. Any other?
Any better ideas?
Better ideas, yeah.
Can you clarify what you really mean by visualize using the TP profile?
Yeah, so for you to have voltage and angle and flow in some ways to put it down on the individual node, you need to convert whatever you have in the SV into the connectivity node, because all of that goes through the TP. So so the idea that you have a tool and you can visualize a diagram layout or geographical layout, and then you have the feature of actually showing the concrete flow based on the TP and SV. So in that way, the visualization is independent from the ability to calculate it. Of course, if you have a tool that can do it on real time and you can change a value and it all happening, all honored for you to do that, but there could be some tools that doesn't have it, but they can still visualizing it.
Simdesk?
We're not advocating any tools here.
Okay.
Oh, you want to have me killed, huh?
Not yet.
No, of course there are different tools, and of course, again, market we would like to, and of course we come back to when we get short circuit result, dynamic result. So all of these, dealing with the ability to visualizing result.
So, okay, so if there's no more opinion on that topic, that might be good direction to revisit this category and maybe focus more on the visualization rather than on the load flow. Now, which one we are? Yeah, so on the difference file, so you maybe notice that there is some issues with this additional table that I mentioned, which specifies per profile which test use cases should be covered, and in that table we wrongly listed the difference file for each of the profiles. So this difference files test use case will only be possible to be run for. So I think that table is okay, but there was another one into the Excel which didn't get fixed. So in that table, we will make sure that the profiles that does not support difference file exchange have no reference to the test use case which requires a difference file exchange. So that's more kind of information for now, just to mention. And we can move to the next one, which is another exciting topic. When we come to the comparison, yeah, Sven, you wanted to say?
Yeah, but I should not say too much. I just want to say that, I mean, we are just saying that it's not a test case. So, I mean, of course, if you want to use the difference model to exchange all the different model diagrams, you know, SV, SSH, there's nothing preventing you from doing that. It's just that we don't look that in the conformance.
Yeah. So the on the next one is another, I think, a good topic to have discussion here. In some of the test use cases, we say you need to have 1% difference between the kind of the reference results and the solution that you provide. And some of you were saying, yeah, is it 1% the right one, or what should be the right percentage? Is it 5 or it's 50? So that's something we need to. Yeah, what's your opinion on that? And you should keep in mind that here we are talking in a situation where the settings for the load flow should be fixed for the test use case or for the test step. So this is also something that was identified as a gap. So this should definitely be done. But when you think about same conditions, well, you can still have a difference in the results, and the question is how much that should be. Young, you are raising hand.
Yeah. The major concern, again, I'm not too worried about when you have the fixed controls. If you are not doing tap changing, not doing area interchange also, then usually the power flow is quite accurate because you are starting from flat start and using the same Newton-Raphson or Gauss-Seidel or whatever algorithm you do. But what bothers me is really when you enable the tap changer control, when you enable the bank control, different application will have the the internal intelligence to deal with some products are doing the tap changer first, and then banks come later to basically accommodate any of the voltage deviation, and some are doing the reverse style, and also they are treating the tap changer control differently. You can do that continuously. You can do a discrete control, and all those kind of stuff is really the devil's in the detail. I think would make the result sometimes quite often off by a lot, not necessarily 1% or 5%. Sometimes if your tap changer is by differ by 1%, you may have a voltage of maybe 5 or 10% already. So that's one.
I think that's a very, very good point. A little bit the direction we want to go is that we can specify this. To one side that we can specify it doesn't mean that it's a requirement for everybody to understand it. But what we really want to do is that at least if you have a certain logic in the tool, that you're able to export that logic so a receiving tool can understand. And if you have different priority, as you pointed out, then you can say that, okay, that can explain why the result is so different. That means in a way that we can then says, if you have the same setting, it needs to be difference cannot be more than this. But then you have to kind of prove what was the setting, because I think it's fair for both the utility and any receiving system to understand a little bit how did you achieve it. What was your settings? How did you prioritize the different set of controls?
Sure, but that to me is not conformity. It's more interoperability.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. So I think we need to have some, because if we allow like 20% tolerance, then do we want to see this 20% different when you do the studies with the real models? Then it would be not so nice. So if the small model it's going all directions in terms of comparison, and then we would have really big problem in
Exactly. So what we have now happening in like the QOCDC is specifying exactly the type of algorithm that you need to do. And with that, then you have conformity to that particular set. The problem is like in the factory acceptance type of things, we don't necessarily say this is the only way you can do it. So this is kind of the...
Should we have maybe what we can do there, and that's you can feedback as well, is to have a different situations where we are convinced that this is like a must do, should have very close result, and we target this. Maybe that would be an escape.
I think the conclusion here is if it's fixed without controls, the difference should be very, very small. And I think we can agree on 1 or 2%. When the regulation, we cannot do that. So we either have to specify exactly the regulation that you need to do, so the priorities and all of that, or we have to just accept that they are finding a solution.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, the test use case you have with fixed control, I think the difference, the restriction is even more that you have to match up to 4 decimal places, and this I think 1% is for the SV profile. If you have a SV profile, you run the tab changer enable, then your result should be matching at least within 1%. That's even more relaxing than the fixed one.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, that's one area to further consider here the discussion and see how that will get finalized. I think the next one was on, that's a little bit on the automation that we already discussed. So there are some of the cases like on the import where we were thinking that there's really very almost no way to validate this rather than a screenshot. And there was some proposals if you think it would be possible to request kind of export of a log or something like that, so that we avoid to have screenshots exchange. Marily, you are raising hand. Was it on the previous one?
No, just on this one. This is here to mention there's around, I would say, 10, 20 test use cases on import and export only, where you cannot validate them in a machine readable kind of or automated way. And we have submitted some proposals or feedback to kind of move them into more machine readable. This is I think the feedback on these test use cases. And my point here also, I would be interested in hearing from you and from Svein. When do you think we would get feedback on these various topics that is being raised today, or maybe resolution, I would say.
We're hoping to give full feedback by the when we're sending it out in April/May.
Okay.
So any more suggestions or comments on that issue? Do you think that it would be possible for you to supply some structured log file or something like that, or you prefer to stick to screenshot kind of application? Do you have any thoughts on that? Yeah, Emil, I think.
Yeah, I would really try to avoid any kind of not necessarily required features and functions within tools, vendor tools, just for the case of for the sake of the conformity, because that's also code that we need to maintain and fix and so on. So if I mean, is here the focus on the exchange of data or really validating only the tools? So okay, some certain degree of effort is okay and probably required, but I'm really not sure if we need such an overkill, like extensive logging, which is then again delivered in a standardized way. So just to be sure that I know we have imported something correctly or not.
Yeah, that's also my opinion. Here is Jordan speaking. Absolutely. Also, that would be too much if we have to even make some structured log file to make this test procedure. And even then, how can you control that it is okay or not? I can write anything I want into this export file.
So, Lino, you also raise hand?
Yeah, I think that maybe a clarification here is necessary, because the log was not meant as a proposal to implement logging of the imports itself, but actually to present an output of the validation of the imported model, because that is something that any application should do. So you should check the validity of the model and apply either the OCL or the shackle, because otherwise you don't know what you're importing. So the tools should have that quality check. And then it's just a question of, once you have this output from the validation rules, that you can present it in a structured or semi-standardized or agreed upon format. So not a log of the importing process, but actually the output of the validation from the imported file. Because what you can then do is that you can create an error on purpose in the file, and you can see if your tool can pick up on it. And that is actually something that's important in practice, in our view.
Yeah, okay, but anyway, also when we import something and we do load flow, and we have problems in the load flow, then we see it all in the messages. Also, when a line length is 0, then we see that in the tool load flow is not running because of line length 0 or other problem. Also, if the load flow runs, then it runs, and if the results are correct, then the import is correct. And the other test would be we change something in the tool, export that, make a re-import, and look if the results are correct. And then we can make maybe also a quicker test procedure with that case, that we say, okay, we import, we change something, change data, open a switch, export, re-import. Does the single line diagram look the same? Is after the calculation the results are the same as it is saved from in the ENTSO-E test cases. And then tested a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that is a good approach, but the only challenge is when you have tools that support only import, then you cannot do this. You cannot check that they re-export something because they don't support export.
Exactly. Maybe we should really split, as somebody already said, for tools who have everything included as a load flow, short circuit, and so on, that we maybe make some different test cases. Something like I mentioned now, because when I do that, then I already checked import of SSH equipment and so on, and export SV. Everything is done then in one or two runs, or
I think that's a very good point, meaning that if you don't do power flow, then you have to do other set of reporting, for whatever you import or export in a way, particularly importing, that you are reporting it if you don't do power flow. But I think we have already now we have a standard coming out that we are talking about errors and reporting errors. I did open a question and work group 13, or a combined working group, looking at quality, because data quality is a hot topic, and we're having a lot of people screaming that's bad data, and not really pointing out what do you mean by bad data. And we need to to think about this also in our approach here. So, but I think that we need to standardize those, because even just getting some kind of ad hoc, you need to maintain it. You then need to also test that the logs working. It's like, and you get a lot of overhead. And there is one specification done in the QO/CDC, but I haven't checked that too carefully. But that is one way of dealing with it. I think that we got some good input there.
Maybe we can take, I think we have maybe 1-2 points, and we can then start to close. So the last one is, I think we mentioned, maybe some of you mentioned that depending on the tool, and some of you were saying that we need to have different cases or different test configurations. And the question here was, do we add in the conformity scheme ability for negative testing? So the tester that is validating the tool can then request the vendor now take that test and import it and run it, and then we see if it's okay or not okay. And this is to increase kind of the confidence of the testing. Would you see that as a approach to be unblock? Because I'm not sure. I think the current scheme is saying that the assessment body, I think, is not applying different than previously available test configurations. So do you have some opinion on that? A surprise case that you get? Yeah,
all the vendor wants to have surprise cases.
Yeah, Yank, you want to say something?
Yeah, I remember. I remember seeing. I remember seeing one use case, test use case in the Excel sheet that has this type of surprise test. Or I forgot how you call it, but I remember. Yeah, that's also included in the test case.
Okay, so we need to maybe see to see in all others that could be kind of introduced when it makes sense, of course.
Yeah, just a quick comments. I think it's a good idea. In fact, I think that the ENTSO-E should develop 2 sets of tests, one published, one not published. That way, we can make sure all the tools tests were not just targeted for the test models. Because based on our previous experience, some of the vendors just build their tools, all those features, using the test configuration as their basis. I think it's the wrong idea. I think it's better to have some hidden test sets just to catch them. Just my comment.
I think that's a very, very good point. The problem is that creating good test cases is difficult. And sometimes, I mean, it doesn't happen that often, but sometimes we do make mistakes. And it's really bad if we are failing someone and it turns out that our test case is wrong. Now, by publishing all of these, we kind of saying it's community hasn't picked up on these errors, and thereby pro facto they are correct in a way. So it's a challenge in that way. I mean, if we were really, really good and smart and making sure that we didn't do any mistake, that would be a very good approach. But it does happen that we do mistakes.
So maybe we see.
I do mistake, Chavda doesn't.
Yeah. So can we go to the next slide? Just because I am just cautious about the time. We have 1 minute, but I think this here it's maybe not that super necessary to discuss. What do you think, Sven?
No, I think when the SC and OP, I think we need to look at what we can do that for test cases, and then obviously we're missing the result of short circuit and dynamic, and we really need to push forward that those are standardized, because really to test them. But I think let's get the stuff up and running. But any guys, if you have proposal on this, give us feedback.
Yeah, it's a question I had too, Sven. So it's yeah, no recommendation yet.
Yeah, for the short circuit result, we did have a European project which actually proposed it's like one class with 5-6 attributes, and that has the potential of having that as a profile, but now it's not yet into the pipeline. So maybe that will come after some time, but now if we don't have anything, we are left with the manual comparison on this one. And the same for the dynamics. So the dynamics, there are maybe 200 different standard models, and each of these model could have 5 to 10 particular set of data. And if you really want to run that, the mathematics behind covers all the combinations. You cannot really do that without extensive automation.
Yeah.
So this is also something we will maybe try to clarify into the conformity, because people may easily get confused if a vendor is certified, let's say, for support of the dynamics profile, and then things get started exchange in reality, and you don't really have a guarantee that all the models are supported and you get the same simulation response. I think there's no way in the current scheme that we can guarantee that.
Yeah, it's especially difficult.
I don't think we should go. We are kind of 1 minute overtime.
Yeah.
In Europe, it's late in the evening. In US, they are just getting the coffee. But just to summarize, thanks a lot for showing up, and thanks a lot for a lot of good feedback. But don't stop the feedback. Everything is easier to change now. So in a year when you've been struggling and gonna do the conformance, be aware that you did have the opportunity to come with good feedbacks now, and we'll do our best to address those. So the thing, we're going to be looking at all the comments, we're going to provide feedback to them. We're also going to finish the test configuration with the missing types that Chavdar went through, and we're going to be working to get the case, the schema adapted, and then the publication we think is in June. And the FDIS is now out for approval, and we can, we assume that they will be approved, because we've been addressing just comments that's been in part of the CDV. And then be aware of this change process, and then we're going to try to get that baseline and improve it.
Okay, so thanks, Svein. I think this is a good summary to also conclude and to finish this meeting. So I would like to thank you again all for joining us in this webinar, and please feel free to contact me and to write me for anything that you have regarding this process, and we will also inform you in time for all the steps that we will take regarding the feedback and regarding the plans that we have to finalize this process. So thank you again, all of you. I propose to close the meeting now.
Yeah. Thanks, Arsene.
Thank you all. Bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.